When we look back at the gaming landscape of 2010, one title stands out as both ambitious and controversial: Dante's Inferno. Developed by Visceral Games and published by EA, the game attempted something bold: to turn Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy into a hack-and-slash action adventure. Much like its obvious inspiration, God of War, the gameplay leaned on cinematic combat, quick-time events, and large boss battles, but what made it unique was its dark, grotesque interpretation of hell itself. Players guided Dante through the 9 circles, encountering twisted imagery and creative enemy designs that were praised for their style, even if the combat itself became somewhat repetitive in the latter stages. Although the game launched with mixed critical reception, its impact was undeniable. In fact, it managed to sell around 1 million copies worldwide, which for a brand new intellectual property was far from insignificant. Yet here is where the story becomes complicated. On the one hand, those sales proved there was an audience for Dante's grim journey. On the other hand, they were not the sort of blockbuster numbers that guaranteed a sequel in the eyes of EA. This tension between solid but not spectacular commercial success and the high expectations of a major publisher would come to define the fate of the series. Adding to the intrigue was the way the first game ended. Instead of closing the narrative, Dante's Inferno concluded with Dante leaving the depths of hell, his eyes set on Mount Purgatory. That final shot served as a tantalizing cliffhanger, practically inviting players to anticipate the next chapter. Moreover, early reports and developer comments hinted at concrete plans for a sequel, sometimes even referred to as Purgatorio. Rumors of prototype mechanics, such as an ascension-based structure matching the climb toward redemption, only fueled speculation. In this sense, the original title felt less like a finished story and more like the opening act of a planned trilogy. However, when we turn from the story to the studio, the picture becomes even clearer. Visceral Games, the team behind Dante's Inferno, was not a one-hit wonder. They were also responsible for the critically acclaimed Dead Space franchise and had experience developing both original titles and licensed projects. Yet despite this track record, the studio's path took a sharp turn. In 2017, EA closed Visceral entirely, canceling its in-progress Star Wars project and redistributing staff across other divisions. With that decision, any lingering possibility of a direct Dante's Inferno sequel essentially disappeared, because the very team most invested in the world no longer existed. Of course, the absence of a sequel has never stopped fans from holding on to the secrets and hints left behind. The cliffhanger ending, the whispers of a Purgatorio concept, and the passion of a small but loyal fanbase keep the idea alive. These traces remind us that the game was designed with continuation in mind, even if corporate strategy and sales realities cut that journey short. In fact, it is precisely this unfinished quality that makes people continue to ask, what if Dante had been allowed to climb beyond hell? So could Dante's Inferno 2 ever happen? In theory, yes. EA still owns the property, which means it could revive the franchise at any time, either by assigning it to another internal team or by licensing it out to an external studio. There is also the possibility of a spiritual successor, a new title inspired by Dante's themes but divorced from the official license, especially since many ex-Visceral developers have moved on to other projects. Alternatively, EA could test the waters with a remaster of the first game, gauging whether renewed interest justifies a full sequel. Nevertheless, any future installment would have to carefully consider its design. Purgatory is thematically different from hell, and climbing a mountain of redemption would require more than simply recycling hack-and-slash combat. Early ideas suggested mechanics emphasizing verticality, transformation, and moral choice, all of which could give a sequel its own identity while remaining faithful to the Divine Comedy. More importantly, pacing would need refinement, ensuring the gameplay variety lasted through the entire journey rather than tapering off after the initial circles. In the end, the story of Dante's Inferno is as much about what could have been as what actually was. It was a game that dared to adapt a cornerstone of world literature into a visceral video game experience, left audiences with a clear invitation for continuation, and yet was cut short by the realities of business and shifting industry priorities. And perhaps that is why speculation about Dante's Inferno 2 endures, because the first game did not truly feel like an ending. Until EA decides otherwise, fans will continue to hope for the day when the gates of Purgatory will finally open.